Hello everyone, I'm Cody Douglas, and today I'll be talking about two studies on multistable perception. Before I begin to consider these studies and their implications, I'm going to provide you with a few opportunities to engage in multistable perception while I define what multistable perception is. Multistable perception is the activity of noticing different percepts or ideas of what is being perceived from the same stimulus. The rabbit-duck illusion you're seeing right now is a famous example of a multistable percept or ambiguous image, perhaps because it is fairly easy to switch from seeing one image to the other. It may be particularly easy for you to interpret this image as various objects because it is old, originally from an 1892 issue of the German magazine Fliegende Blätter. But you also may have been faster to notice the rabbit and duck within this image because I brought up the subject of multistable percepts as I showed it to you. This image is also a solid jumping off point for the rest of this presentation because it only has 2 or 3 features that change with its reinterpretation, these being the perception of a beaker ears, the direction that the animal is facing, and the perception of the little divot on the right side of the head as the meeting place between the rabbit's mouth and nose, or as some detail on the back of the duck's head. Even if you focus more on one aspect of this image, it doesn't change as a visual stimulus, and the features that compose it regardless of which percept you think you're seeing. It is also important to consider a detail that our book mentions, that perception is not just a bottom-up process. In citing a study by Mosh Barr, the authors note that when we perceive what we expect to perceive, we are faster to respond to a stimulus. Barr used magnetoencephalography to record subject responses to expected and unexpected stimuli and found that subjects' frontal lobes were faster to activate than their temporal lobes by 50 milliseconds when they encountered a recognized stimulus. In this instance, the frontal lobe would be involved in top-down stimulus prediction based on known percepts, while the temporal lobe would be involved in bottom-up stimulus recognition to construct a percept. So the faster response time of the frontal lobe suggests that we play an active role in determining what we perceive. And now that I've given you at least a working knowledge of multistable perception and the processes related to it, I'm going to move on to discussing some research related to it. The first study we'll be looking at is Warden-Scholl's study, Stochastic or Systematic, seemingly random perceptual switching in bistable events triggered by transient unconscious cues. Here's the spinning dancer illusion that they used for the study. It works as a multistable percept because you can perceive the dancer spinning clockwise or counterclockwise. It took me about 3 minutes to see her change direction, and I still find it difficult to get the dancer to shift from spinning clockwise to spinning counterclockwise, so I don't know if you'll see it work as a multistable percept here. Anyways, the authors of this study chose to work with the dancer as their multistable image because it is notoriously difficult to perceive it rotating in a different direction. This was a relatively complex study, so I'll sum up its researchers' goal by saying that they were trying to see if perceptual switching could be influenced by subconscious cues. In this case, the subconscious cues were pixel-thin white contours that were added to the animation for a very brief amount of time to give the different parts of the dancer's body a more clear depth relationship. Data was collected with surveys used after subjects saw the dancer and with buttons that allowed subjects to indicate how they saw the dancer moving when they were still observing it. After conducting 4 experiments using this animation, researchers found evidence that only about 30% of participants noticed the added white contours when they saw the dancer, that participants who were functionally blind to the contours were more likely to see the direction of the dancer switch shortly after they were presented with orienting contours, that contours presented for 33 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, and 66 milliseconds have the same potential to cause this switching, and that subconscious cues about the dancer's movement that were inconsistent with subject's current idea of how she was rotating led to nearly 50% more orientation switching than consistent cues. Together, these findings suggest that the content of the subconscious cues influences how multistable images are perceived. More broadly, these findings indicate that our understanding of objects and events can be influenced by unnoticed events. Next, we have Vetter, Haynes, and Path's study, Evidence for Multistability in the Visual Perception of Pigeons. As you may have guessed from this study's title, its researchers wanted to see how animals respond to multistable images. While previous research on monkeys and cats has been conducted, our researchers said that these studies investigated binocular rivalry, whereas this study was designed to examine the effects of other multistable images. In particular, researchers wanted to see if pigeons would perceive multiple percepts from multistable images, as their doing so would suggest that humans are not the only species capable of reinterpreting multistable images. Unlike the previous study, this present research wasn't designed with the subconscious processes of its subjects in mind, because the pigeons involved probably wouldn't be able to answer a post-experiment survey all that well. And instead of the spinning dancer illusion, researchers presented the pigeons with an orthogonal alternating movement display, or OAM display, as a multistable image. Here's what the display would look like. It's just four lights that serve as the corners of an imaginary square. Figures A and B would only produce unambiguous horizontal or vertical motion, but by lighting only one diagonally opposite pair of lights at a time, this display causes perceptual switching between images of horizontally and vertically moving points. 8 pigeons were used for the first and second experiment of this study. These pigeons were trained through operant conditioning to peck one button if they saw horizontal movement from the orthogonal display and another if they saw vertical movement. While pigeons were able to indicate when they saw movement with the A and B setups, 5 out of 8 pigeons were shown to peck stochastically when shown setup C, indicating that they saw alternating phases of a multistable stimulus. Researchers believe that the other 3 pigeons did not see the display as multistable, whereas it was assumed that subjects would perceive the multistability of a stimulus. With our study on subconscious influences, this study had to find evidence that other animals, or at least pigeons, are capable of perceiving multistability like we do. Researchers followed up this experiment with another test and found that they could alter which type of movement the pigeons saw by adjusting the aspect ratio of the OAM display in a way that was shown to alter humans' perception. While this type of manipulation resembles the manipulation we saw with the spinning dancer, it wasn't intended to be subtle. The results of this experiment also indicate that pigeons can be influenced to see one type of movement over another. The authors of this study also note that because the pigeons did not know they would be observing a multistable image, foreknowledge of the multistability of an image is not necessary for observers to experience percept switching. This finding is consistent with the results of the last study, and it is worth noting that the authors of our pigeon study do consider top-down processes to be influential in human perception. Overall, evidence from this study indicates that pigeons, and perhaps most animals, perceive multistable images like we do. To follow up on these experiments, I'd like to see if the subtle cues used to influence percept switching in stochastic or systematic can also be used to alter which percept pigeons perceive from a multistable image. Like Warden Scholl, we'll be using the spinning dancer illusion. Pigeons would be trained to peck one button in response to a clockwise spinning dancer and another in response to a counterclockwise spinning dancer, and added contours will be fully visible during these trials. Once all pigeons are able to accurately distinguish between clockwise and counterclockwise spinning, they should be tested using a subtly altered version of the dancer for a set amount of time. For now, I'll say 15 minutes. A version of the dancer with contours suggesting either clockwise or counterclockwise motion will be shown to the pigeons, and these two versions of the dancer will switch every 30 seconds. If pigeons peck to show that they are seeing switching versions of the dancer like human subjects did, then we may also be able to conclude that they are influenced by subconscious stimuli like we are. I believe that's everything I have to say for now. Thank you for watching.